Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, welcome. How exciting. We're here, we're together, and things are about to get interesting. Tomorrow is our first exam. How are we all doing? How is life? Welcome, Alfie. So many people in the chat today. Lots of questions to be had. Lots of comments, I'm sure, coming through. Hello, Rubik's Cube Girl. Good to see some familiar faces in here. Hello, Carty. Has it started? Yes, it's started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's get a little poll going, shall we, to start with. How are we feeling about tomorrow? Awesome, great, good, down bad. What are we feeling? Let's get the poll going. Let's see how we're all doing. I'm going to go through a few housekeeping bits for the first few minutes. I want to get straight into the content because I'm really very, what's the word? Humbled to have so many people here. Welcome, Abdullah, traveling over from Louis' stream. So I want to get into things quickly, but I just want to ensure that everybody is in the right place. We are here for Romeo and Juliet and Jekyll and Hyde. That's the first two texts that you'll be doing tomorrow. I'll go through sort of exam board stuff, lots of questions about that in just a moment. Good to see you. Whoa, we got awesome, great, down bad. Now, well, by the end of this stream, I guarantee you we'll run this poll again. We'll run this poll again at the end of this stream, and boom, we're going to be all feeling great and ready to go tomorrow. So I'm going to send you off at 7 p.m. ready to have some dinner, get a good night's sleep, ready for tomorrow, Lit Paper 1. I'm very excited to see what it's going to be on. Just briefly, I'm Alex Sarichkin. Alex does English here at My Headspace. Fully qualified English teacher, over 11 years now of teaching experience. Taught at 4 different schools, 3 in London, 1 in sunny Swindon. And now I'm here at My Headspace and looking forward to this stream. Revision Dump says I'm going to be the saviour. Buddy, you're here. That's what we like. No stress, nice and easy, keeping it real. That's the plan for today. Neil does maths. Good to see you here, my old buddy. Right, just as a quick one, in terms of structure for today, so till 5:30, Romeo and Juliet. Till 5:30, Romeo and Juliet. That's where we are right now. So if you're not doing Romeo and Juliet, if you're doing Macbeth, you need to be in Louis' stream. At 5:30, we're going to take a 5-minute break. That's your opportunity to get yourself a glass of water, to get yourself a little snack. I've got some cashew nuts right here that I'll be indiscriminately munching on throughout. And then we're back at 5:35 till 7 o'clock going through Jekyll and Hyde. What are we doing today? Well, content and context recaps. Okay, so a little bit of the context of the play and the novel and just kind of going back through the plot just so that we're all clear. 10 key quotes. The 10 key quotes I think that you need to know for tomorrow. If you know any others, even better, fantastic. Extract deep dives, and then some planning of essay questions. I'm not going to have time to do 3 full essays. You have in your booklets, in your workbooks, 3 example questions. My advice is to do as I do, and then obviously you can use those in the morning or later on this evening as you please, okay? Down, bad, good, they're both at the top. We got this exactly, Chandler. That is the message for today. Cool. I'm really keen to get started. Just as a final little bit, this is for AQA. If you are doing any other exam boards, Edexcel, Educas, I mean, obviously, if you're doing Romeo and Juliet, the story is the same. It's not like Educas have their own version of Romeo and Juliet, okay? However, the questions that I go through towards the kind of latter half of this session will be focused for AQA. Which texts are covered? As I've said, Romeo and Juliet, Jekyll and Hyde. For me, Louis over on Macbeth and Christmas Carol. When are the exams? The first one's tomorrow, as you will know. Can I watch this back later? Yes, you can. Is there a break at 5:30 for 5 minutes? What do the mods do? They're going to answer some technical questions, keep things respectful and efficient. Ria is one of our mods today. Welcome to you, Ria. So many questions about predictions. I'll come on to predictions in a second. Use the chat to contribute questions. If you're watching this and not subscribed, you need to subscribe in order to send the questions to my channel. So please, can you do that now? No spam, no beef. Keep the questions relevant. Use the workbook to record notes. You can use that on the way to school in the morning. And let's remember our humanity. That's why we're here. We're human beings. Let's keep it real. Last but not least, we have CRAM courses for your other subjects all through the exam period, as I'm sure you know. Krisha, the link to the workbook is in the description of my video. Okay. Now, a few questions coming in that I just want to answer. Number one, will I do predictions? No. No predictions. Why? Because only the exam board know what your exam is on tomorrow. Okay? Only they know. If I just pick a random thing out of thin air, yeah, maybe I'll be right. But it's just as likely that I will be wrong. We're going to cover a nice spread of the themes, the ideas, the characters, the plot, so that you are prepared whatever your question is. Okay? The second, about grades. What are we aiming for? This is for all. Okay, it's for everybody. It's revision. Okay, a CRAM course revision session where we cover the plot, the characters, the main ideas, and do some practice questions together. Okay, Maura, I'm doing Romeo and Juliet and Jekyll and Hyde. Louis, the link to his stream is in the description. He's doing Macbeth right now. Okay, let's begin. So my first thing, and whenever I was in schools, most important thing, do you know the story? Let's get some people, and everybody really, popping into the chat. Let's just fill this in. So the story begins where? Where is Romeo and Juliet set? Thank you to Bella. Verona. Fantastic. Where the something and something families. Who are our two key families? Because if you don't know this, it's going to be a problem tomorrow. But I'm sure you do because your revision won't have started today. So the story begins in Verona, where the who and who. Nice one, Carty. Nice one. Bella, again, well done. Distant Studios, fantastic answers. Where the Montagues and Capulets families are engaged in a bitter feud. By feud, I of course mean this classic ancient grudge. Romeo, a Montague, is infatuated with a woman named, what's his old love called? The lady who so harshly breaks his heart. Nice one, people. Rosaline. But his feelings fade when he meets Juliet at a Capulet party. Think of the transformation here. Okay, this is a real moment of transformation. So much of this exam is about you showing your examiners that you understand the way these characters change. As soon as he sees Juliet, boom, Romeo is a different person. Right, so they fall in love instantly, despite their families' what? Rivalry, yeah, I like that very much. Adstratique, what a name. Rivalry, you could also say feud, I guess. With the help of someone, the couple secretly something. Now, the answer to this is, of course, Friar Lawrence, and he helps them to marry. Now, my little tip for tomorrow in terms of Friar Lawrence would be to discuss the way he acts as a surrogate father to Romeo. If you're not sure what the word surrogate means, it means in place of. Okay? Romeo's parents, where are they? They ditched him, pretty much, don't they? In fact, when he's all broken-hearted and talking about, these unknown chaotic forms, these unknown modes of being, they send Benvolio to speak to him. Okay? Friar Lawrence kind of replaces the absent parent, in my opinion. Okay? And he marries them, which is arguably, in my opinion, a little bit of a reckless act. Yo, Hyper, welcome. Now, however, trouble brews when Tybalt, a Capulet, challenges Romeo to a duel. Romeo refuses, but his friend Mercutio accepts and is killed. Mercutio, fascinating little character. In a fit of rage, Romeo kills Tybalt and is banished. Those of you who've seen the classic is Friar Lawrence a good or bad character? That's a great question. I think his ethics are ambiguous. I think that he thinks he's doing the right thing, but his actions, of course, what do they lead to? Well, they lead to deaths. Cool. Now, Juliet is devastated by Romeo's banishment and the news that her parents want her to marry Paris, right? You're well done, those of you saying that Romeo is banished to Mantua, which is not too far from Verona, actually, if you look on a map. Sped up world, absolutely. His intentions are good, but they don't lead to a good ending. Talking about Friar Lawrence there. Alexandra, what does ambiguous mean? Thank you for that great question. It means unclear. Unclear. We can't be sure either way. Friar Lawrence tells us the reason that he does that is to bring that ancient grudge to that new mutiny, as it were. And that he does achieve that, but not in the way that he thinks. Right, she seeks help from Friar Lawrence, who gives her a potion that will make her appear dead. This is what I mean about Friar Lawrence acting in kind of a questionable way, in my opinion. Guys, Romeo wasn't adopted. His actual father is Friar Lawrence. Claudia, that's not true. That's just not true. Let's try not to have anything that could confuse people in this stream. Romeo's parents are Lord and Lady Montague. Okay. Yeah, he's not adopted. Okay, he's just the child of those two. The household's rancor to pure love, Imogen, fantastic, absolutely. Right, the plan is that Romeo will come to the rescue when she awakes. However, Romeo does not receive the letter and believes Juliet is truly dead. He returns to Verona, buys a poison, and takes his own life beside Juliet's body. When Juliet awakens and sees Romeo, she kills herself. Okay. The deaths of Romeo and Juliet finally prompt the Montagues and Capulets to end their strife. Now, let's go through, on the back of this, some important bits. Okay, one of the main things that students tend to miss, and particularly if you're aiming 7+, this play is a tragedy. Okay, the tragedy is not a theme, it's the genre. Okay, and in order to make a tragedy, it has to have these things. Okay, it has to have a tragic hero. Okay, and generally that is Romeo. However, we could make an argument that it's Juliet too, because the play is called Romeo and Juliet. When they marry, they almost become like one individual, really, particularly under the eyes of God. Baguette cheese, exactly. Greek tragedies. All tragic heroes must have a hamartia. Okay, and what that means is a fatal flaw, right? As in something about their personality, about their character that will ultimately lead to their deaths. For Romeo, that's typically seen as his impulsiveness, like his impulsive behavior. Or, Gina's said fickle. That's another great word. For Juliet, that's an M, not the letter I'm looking for. It could be her naivety, her innocence in a way. Is Romeo a Montague or a Capulet? Romeo is a Montague. So we need a tragic hero that has a hamartia. Okay, so that's the important thing about our characters. Shakespeare's tragedies always end in a death. So, of course, who dies, or rather, let's just pop into the chat, please. Who is dead by the time the play ends? Who is dead by the end of the play? Millie, how can I include Hamasha in my essay? You would talk about Romeo's Hamasha or Juliet's Hamasha. Okay? So we have Romeo is dead. Juliet is dead. Welcome back, Makala. Mercutio is dead. Tybalt is dead. Paris is dead. So many people are dead. And of course, often forgotten, Lady Montague, who dies off stage supposedly because she was so sad about Romeo being banished. So let's talk about our tragic heroes. Let's talk about the Hamashas. Let's talk about the fact that Shakespeare's tragedies end in a death. Just so you know, Shakespeare's comedies end in weddings. Can you always write about the death scene for the final paragraph? Daily inspired? I think that if it's relevant to the question, you should. The fourth thing is peripeteia, okay, which translates to the turning point. This is the moment in the play where after you can't go back to how things used to be. Okay, everything has changed. The turning point is, in my opinion, the death of Mercutio and Tybalt. If you are aiming for grade 7 or above, you need to talk about the play as a tragedy. Okay, I think that it's a massive, massive gap in student essays, because remember, to get a 9, you need to talk about the play as a construct. Okay, Romeo and Juliet is not a documentary. Okay, it's not a factual account. It's a play. Shakespeare thought it up in his head and wrote it. And because he wrote it, he made it and constructed it in a certain way. He wanted to write a tragedy. The same way someone who sits down to write a Marvel movie says, I'm going to write a superhero movie, and they apply all the conventions of that. So if you're aiming for 7+, you need to be speaking about the play as a creation. That's why we talk about these things. Tragic heroes, Hamashas, death, peripeteia. The last one, or the last two actually, anagnorisis, which is where the tragic hero has a moment of realization. Again, this is kind of up for debate. I would say if you're going to and what they're realizing is that essentially they messed up in a big way. I would say the quote there in Act 3, Scene 1, I am Fortune's fool. Yes, you around Islam. Yes, that will be staying here as a recording. Orpheus and Eurydice and other Greek poetry inspired. Absolutely. The Greeks and Aristotle particularly were the foundations of tragedy. This is where Romeo realized essentially that he is a victim of fate. Audrey, if you've never heard these words before, don't worry. They're here. If you feel comfortable using them in your exam tomorrow, then use them. The last one, of course, is catharsis. And this is what the audience experience. It's basically emotional release. Okay? So there's 2 steps here, and the reason I've started our session with this. Step 1, do you know the story? Do you know the plot? Because if you don't know the plot of Romeo and Juliet, now is your time to know it, okay? But I'm going to assume that most of you, because the exam is tomorrow, know the story. Once you've known the story, then you need to think about how does this story fit into the genre, and the genre is tragedy. Okay? This is a tragedy. How do I include this in my essay, Kims? Well, when you're talking about the play, or you're talking about the characters in the play, you can bring these words in. So when you mention Romeo, you can call him the tragic hero. When you speak about Romeo, say, for example, rashly killing Tybalt in a moment of anger, avenging the death of his friend, you could talk about this being his hamartia, his flaw, his impulsiveness. When you talk about the deaths of Mercutio and Tybalt, you can call it the peripeteia of the play. Okay. The fifth one is anagnorisis. It's a moment of realization. Okay, so that's the plot. Tio, absolutely, just briefly then on catharsis. Well, look, catharsis is an emotional release. Okay, so for example, at the end of a romance, when the two love interests finally fall in love, you know, we as the audience are like, oh, that's amazing. That's catharsis. When we see Romeo and Juliet die, and we feel very sorry for them, thinking, oh my gosh, they could have had such a beautiful relationship if they'd stayed alive, that is catharsis. Catharsis is an emotional experience. To give you a little bit of background, the Greeks believed that this was the whole reason that we do plays, is to make people feel things without them actually having to go through it themselves. So catharsis is just the emotional release. You might have heard of things being cathartic. Okay, it's the same root. Okay. Yeah, F1 HSB, you could say that. Do I have to link to quotes or can they be separate points? I'm not quite sure what that means there. Catharsis, CATHARSIS. Okay. Again, how do you include this? This is, this is whatever exam board you're on, you can use this stuff. Okay. Gina, the humoral theories, as in like the whole phlegm thing, possibly. Right. So these are 10 key quotes, and we're just going to briefly run through thinking how we could use them. I've tried to give a quote roughly from each act. You may well have other quotes. Okay. So a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Again, can I just say this? And I hope that this stream, we're here to settle. Okay, it's tomorrow. You know more than you think you know. When you get in there and you're in the exam hall, it's all going to come to you. Ali, if you know the moment of play but not the quote, just say exactly. In fact, in the mark scheme, it doesn't say quote, it says references. Okay, and references can just be describing the moment. Do we lose marks if we don't say what quote it's from act it's from? No. Right, there's a few things I want to dig into here just briefly on these. A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Okay, 3 things here to note if you're going to use this quote. 1, this is a play of doubles, okay, because Romeo and Juliet, they're a pair. Hello, Farah, welcome, and goodbye. Doubles, and what I mean is things like, for example, fate versus free will, okay? This reflects the duality of the play. And we see that specifically in this idea of fate, things being star-crossed, this idea of destiny. But what I like here, do I lose marks if I have 2 quotes from the same act? No. Is take their life. So this explains the direction of the play. And the reason why is to build a sense of inevitability. Okay? Mahi, why does he spoil the ending at the very start? It's a great question. He's not spoiling the ending, he's making the play more engaging. It's basically so that as you're watching these 2 people fall in love, in the back of your mind, you know that they will die. Okay? It's kind of making the audience experience fate themselves. You know what's going to happen. F1 HSB, you can, but I would question where it's relevant. Again, we're not really going down the avenue of predictions. Okay, so that's obviously one that people mostly know. If you're writing about that quote, I would explain that it's you can call it, if you call it foreshadowing, that's fine. But I would, if you're aiming 7 plus, I would probably call it tragic inevitability. Okay. My only love sprung from my only hate. So we have here, obviously, an example of contrast. And that reflects, I guess, the kind of confusion within Juliet. Yukiucha, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, saying please slow down. You have access to this stream. It's not going anywhere. Please feel free to come back to it later, but I obviously want to make sure that we leave enough time to cover everything that I've planned, right? Fate to increase the sense of helplessness, absolutely. Lots of people asking what I mean by the duality of the play. What I mean is duality of the play. Essentially, Shakespeare is exploring in this play, are we bound by fate or free will? That's the duality at the heart of the play. And so therefore we have doubles throughout. Things in pairs. Like my only love sprung from my only hate. Is my full name Alexander? Yes, it is. That's not going to help you get a 7 plus. Zeba, why can't foreshadowing get you above a 7? That's not what I said. I said if you're aiming above, you can use this as well. Please also feel free to call it foreshadowing. I'm just trying to give everybody across the grade spectrum that. Swiss Rex oxymorons, we tend to describe words that are, combined. A word like bittersweet, for example, is as an oxymoron. Now, lots of great ideas coming into the chat, celestial imagery, etc., etc. I'm not going to go through every possible interpretations of these lines. These are just the quotes that I think if you knew these 10, you'd be able to answer any question. Okay. Right. So this is the moment of, I guess, kind of romantic excitement. Okay, Romeo is obviously listening to Juliet. She is unaware. You can talk about that in order to pick up the idea around this, that this being a play, a drama. Okay, the kind of staging is exciting, right? The staging of this moment is exciting. Emmeline, we're going to go through thesis statements when we get to the questions. Okay. Obviously, you should know that wherefore means why. But here, I guess what we're seeing, which is quite important, is Juliet shows her desires. Okay, and this is obviously quite a radical female character. That's, I guess, my favorite thing about Romeo and Juliet is that Juliet, she kind of goes against what traditionally women were supposed to do. They're supposed to be that kind of demure, shy kind of vibe, and she's very much like, I want to take control of my own life. Okay, and we see that very much in this moment. Questioning in this way, the fact that she's asking these questions, I guess, shows maturity, doesn't it? We see this a little bit more. Can discuss structure as a way of connoting fate. Absolutely. She's rebellious. Absolutely. I read an example from my school, which gave us the examiner's marking, and on transcript it says methods have levels. I'm not quite sure what that means. We'll get into the mark scheme in a little while. Yeah, James Murray, absolutely, she goes against gender norms. F1 SB, if you want to say that they're that, then you go for it. Right, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Here, I guess, kind of Juliet questions tradition, doesn't she? She's essentially saying, why are things the way that they are? Right? Why are things the way that they are? What's in a name? You know, what is a Montague? What is a Capulet? Okay. Again, this is an example of Juliet's agency and autonomy. The fact that she's showing herself asking these questions, she's sort of resisting or pushing against the status quo. Okay, and I'm not talking about the band. Status quo means way things are. Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Right, this is, you know, if you only know one quote from Romeo and Juliet, it's probably this one. James absolutely pushing against Elizabethan family honor. If you were to say pushing against the status quo, that's obviously AO3, that's context. Gina, I would highly doubt they're going to give you Queen Mab. That's why I'm not spending time on it. I would eat my hat if so. Autonomy, controlling your own life, controlling your own destiny. Okay. What does a plague on both your houses mean? Well, firstly, there's two things going on here. This is another example of foreshadowing. Okay. Can you call this like a peripeteia for her character, like character development? Floof, good question. Peripeteia is about the structure of the plot. Okay, it's not about characters specifically. It's within the plot. This is the turning point for all characters for the story itself. Status quo, as I've said there, the way that, just there above my finger, there, there, the way things are. Yeah. Right, foreshadowing, specifically the deaths of Romeo and Juliet. Can I say that he curses the family, showing the significance of the grudge and how it has impacted life? Yeah, I guess this shows the impact of violence on the innocent. Okay, the impact of violence on the innocent. Gina, why is Mercutio cursing both families when he is a loyal friend to Romeo? Because I guess he realizes what being friends with Romeo has caused him. It's caused him to die. Right? Can't you say innocent people are being dragged into the ancient feud? You can. The ancient grudge, even. And just as a small one, obviously, houses, both House Capulet and House Montague. Okay. Does this foreshadow the actions of fate since the letter doesn't reach him because of the outbreak of plague? Yeah, it could do. But it's not specifically concerned to us that it is that it's plague, like bubonic plague. But yeah, I guess audiences, contemporary audiences, would have like an awareness of plague and what that means. Okay. I thought Mercutio was Romeo's cousin. No, Mercutio is actually the prince's, Prince Escales's cousin. Right. Shortly after, Romeo says, I am Fortune's fool. If you just think like this is obviously a great example to speak about the theme of fate. You've got a little bit in there of alliteration to draw our attention to the, I guess, like to the emotion of Romeo's anagnorisis, right? There's an example if you're wondering how you could use anagnorisis in your essay, yeah. Can you call his death a peripeteia? So the death of Mercutio and Tybalt as a combined thing is that, yes. Fricative. It's not fricative. It's assonant. Sorry, consonant. If anything, fricative obviously implies more harsher sounds. Your K's, your F's are a little bit soft, aren't they? Soft. Fricative. Not quite. Anagnorisis te, as I explained earlier, is the moment of realization. Could you link it to a civil blood makes civil hands unclean? You could definitely. I guess you could say that, Mercutio is an example of civil blood, isn't he? Umar, the exam is a morning exam. Most schools will start around 9 a.m. Mubina, yes, it will be on my channel. So, I Am Fortune's fall. Romeo here is obviously, this is the consequences of his impulsive behavior. Okay, but he's driven by honor. And in some ways, we can see that as actually kind of respectable, the fact that he backs his friend in that way, right? Millie, on the subject of I hope we get a nice question, I've never seen a unkind question. Remember, the examiners want you to do well. They want you to succeed, right? They don't want you to fail. They want you to do well. Okay, so the question has to be accessible all the way from grade 1 to grade 9. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about it being frightening. When we get to some questions in a little while, I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. Now, this is Juliet saying bye to Romeo. This is, I guess, quite a poignant moment. What do I mean by the word poignant? Do we know? Susie, they're definitely not praying for your downfall. I promise you that. What do I mean by the word poignant? Words like, for example, Millie, they definitely will be. Emotional, kind of sad, impactful. This is an example of the way that we speak about tone, feeling. At CRAM, I'm not doing predictions. So farewell, God knows when we shall meet again. They never do see each other again alive. Okay? So this is a kind of, they never see each other alive again. And I think it's also important, like just in terms of the structure of this play, one good thing to think about in terms of structure of Romeo and Juliet is that there are a lot of emotional contrasts. You know what my best example of this? Act 2, Scene 6. So the marriage of Romeo and Juliet, the kind of romantic high point of the play, these two young lovers finally combine and marry. The next scene, Act 3, Scene 1, is the death of Mercutio and Tybalt. So you're taken on this journey. You think, wow, this is incredible. These two young lovers, how beautiful. And then boom, in the next scene, death. Right? Because Shakespeare wants you to experience this kind of fluctuating emotion. Tio, you just asked me about structural analysis. That's an example. Well, Julia, I will lie with thee tonight. Here we have, obviously, to lie, there is a kind of sexual connotation, but we can talk about the corruption of the sexual ideal as this will be death. Okay, so this isn't going to be something that's kind of what's the word, like kind of sexually engaging. The reason why he's lying with her is not for the purposes of copulation. It's to die. And and if we think about the purposes of con well, Jai consummation is specifically what we refer to when the act after a marriage, right? I'm just talking in general about these two young people, spending this kind of intimate time with each other. It's not for the purposes of making life, it's for the purposes of taking life. So that's what I mean about a corruption, right? Cosmics, I'm going to come on to context. It's worth remembering that context is worth 6 marks, right? 6 marks out of 30. The most important thing are your ideas and your analysis. And actually, when we're talking about genre, that's context. When we're talking about the Juliet subverting social norms and that kind of thing, that is also context. Context doesn't just mean a whole load of history, and actually examiners hate students who just dump a load of history. Right, another couple of little bits from me. Oh, happy dagger, this is thy sheath, there rust and let me die. Obviously the dagger, is a symbol of death, and that's what they're heading towards. By placing, she takes her own life. Again, it's an act of love through violence, isn't it? It's an act of love through violence. Again, we can call that a corruption. I think that's a really important word to use. That's a classic example that sped up well's just popped there. She is more masculine than Romeo as he dies via poison. She does something much more, and kind of as a masculine move, I guess. Is symbolism a technique? Yes, it is. It's a method, symbolism. Personification of the dagger. Good, Jess. That's also great analysis. People, the analysis that you guys are posting in this is incredible. Okay, trust yourself, back yourself. Godiva, I don't get it how them consummating their marriage means death. They have a moment of consummation, Act 4, Scene 3, when Romeo sneaks into Juliet's bedroom. We don't see what happens, but the assumption is that they spend the night together intimately. Then he goes off, and they never see each other again. A sheath is something that holds a sword. Okay. There also let me die. And then obviously we have the last line of the play. For never was there a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. This is, of course, presented as a couplet. Is happy dagger a oxymoron? Well, dagger as a word in itself is not, it's not happy sad. Dagger doesn't mean sad. So I don't think it's an oxymoron. I guess you could argue in some ways that possibly it's a juxtaposition of ideas, because typically we use daggers for murder, right? Yo, Lydia, yo, stay humble, welcome. So, for never was there a story of more woe, so this is sadness, than this of Juliet and her Romeo. It ends in a couplet to reflect the couple. Who are the couple? Romeo and Juliet. Kizario, my teacher says it's oxymoronic. I'm not going to argue with your teacher. Okay, obviously your teachers have spent the most amount of time with you. Trust them. Okay, I'm here as a final point of revision. So, in summary, these 10 quotes can be your 10 quotes. Any question that comes up, you could use these 10 quotes for. Okay, this is AQA. This is AQA. Now, this is the overview of the mark scheme. And in summary, ideas, methods, context, and then spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Just as an overview, the total on this paper is 30 plus 4. Okay? AO1 ideas is worth 12 marks, AO2 methods is worth 12, context is worth 6, and SPAG is worth 4. A note on the SPAG, okay? Just write well. Okay, just write well. I don't have any advice in terms of how to get 4 out of 4. It's not that difficult. As long as you're writing correctly and using good vocabulary and using full stops effectively, then you will get 4 out of 4. Okay. The things I want to highlight are this. AO1 ideas, 12 marks. AO2 methods, 12 marks. AO3 context, 6 marks. So 6 marks, it's about half, isn't it, of just one of them two. Students who spend too long on the context do not pick up marks, okay, because it should just inform. Now listen, if you're sitting there tomorrow and you're stuck, I want you to think of this triangle, okay? I want you to think of this triangle. This is the English triangle. In English, when we're writing essays, you're going to be writing about one of these 3 things. You're going to be writing about the author, or you're going to be writing about the text, or you're going to be writing about the audience. And the reason I've put this in a 3, like a triangle, is because these 3 things are all connected, okay? They are in almost like their own little relationship with each other. So when I mean text, that's your methods or your references or the plot, right? Author is obviously Shakespeare, but this is of course about context too. And the audience, well, look, that's you. You're the audience, because you could be talking about, your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings. Or it could be the Elizabethan audience, okay? So if we're saying that Juliet is pushing against Elizabethan expectations of women, that is AO3. You do not need to dump loads of it was written in 1597, and at that time Protestants and Catholics were up against one and each other. Firstly, is it relevant to the question? Secondly, are you actually analysing the play? This is for AQA people. Sorry, does authorial intent come at AO1 or AO3? Well, I guess it could come up anywhere, but and I don't want to spend too much time on this, because the thing I want you to understand is you will get marks for giving your ideas, supporting those ideas with methods, with examples from the play, presenting your response to those, like what does it make me think, what does it make me feel, and lastly, conclude by bringing in a little bit of context. But maybe it's best if I show you this through some past, well, not past, like I put these together through some questions. Okay, so we're going to this is what we're going to do for the next 40 or so minutes. I've got 3 questions. We're going to look through the thematic focus. So you can imagine that the question is on conflict, starting with this moment of the play, explore how Shakespeare presents conflict. We're going to think about, firstly, how would we use the extract? And secondly, which other parts of the play would we respond to? And then I'm going to write the opening thesis statement for each one, okay? If I have time, I may well also, for at least one of them, show you like a kind of main body paragraph. But just as a really quick summary, this is hopefully not too dissimilar to what most teachers say. A good English essay has an introduction and then 3 paragraphs. Okay? The way I've always taught my students is that you drop the extract in chronologically. I know it says starting with the extract. You don't have to. You can if you want. There's no hierarchy. Every teacher has their way of teaching it. This is just how I've always done it, okay? I have an introduction that does 3 things. Firstly, answer the question, and that's my biggest piece of advice. Answer the question they give you, not the question that you want to answer. So really read the question, right? Answer the question, show Shakespeare's intention with the character or theme. Okay, and lastly, small link to context. 3 paragraphs. Let's say the extract was from Act 3, Scene 1. You'd drop it in here, and you'd write about 2 previous parts of the play. Okay? Can we link to the ending throughout our points or only the last paragraph? You can do it throughout as well. You can also jump around if you need to, but this is just the way that I've always done it. Some teachers say 2 paragraphs based on the extract, 2 from elsewhere in the play. That's fine. Again, I'm not going to question, and I'm not here to, the day before an exam, step on your teacher's toes. But remember, you're aiming to write about 2 pages of A4. Okay, roughly. How many quotes per paragraph? As many as you need, but at least 1. Ideally 2, 3. Chloe, do you need a conclusion? I've never read, in all of the exams that I've read, and I've read a lot, I've never read one that was massively improved by a conclusion, to be honest with you. Okay. So let's look at this section. So the theme that we're thinking about, this theme question, is on conflict. Kalo, how much do you have to talk about the extract? One of the big things I always say, use the extract as much as you can, because the extract is there in front of you. Alex, when you say 2 pages, do you mean 2 sides? 2 sides. 1, 2. 2, 1, 2. Yeah? 1, 2. Can I just link to the extract just using 1 quote? Yeah, if you want to. Look, the important, like, if you look at the examiner's report for last year, students can use it as much or as little as they'd like to. But I just think that why would you not use it? It's right there. You know, it's right there. It wants to be used. And it's also, you don't have to remember it. Okay, it's there. So what I would do for this question, let's say that this came up and this was my thing. The first thing that I would do is I would think about what is Shakespeare's message with conflict. So I would just make a little note where I would say, conflict will always lead to innocent lives, innocent suffering, and painful consequences. Right? And then I'm going to use that kind of a guide, right? Extracts have feelings, don't manipulate and use it. I do. I'd focus more on Elizabethan audiences, that kind of thing. Okay, why don't we go through an extract? Okay, why don't we go through this extract and just think? So yeah, ideally, but if you don't have a technique to link to the quote, but you have a good idea, still write about it. I'm not quite sure what your name is there, C8H11N, but that would be fine. You're going to pick up marks writing about the extracts for sure. So this is from Act 1, Scene 1. this moment of the play, firstly, it establishes conflict. Okay, we see, for example, Samson and Gregory. But let's look at this particular section. So Benvolio, it was what sadness lengths Romeo's hours. What is this conflict that he's referring to? What is this conflict that he's referring to? Well done, I am. We're talking about Romeo's inner conflict. Leah, can you still get marks if you don't use the extract? You will struggle to pick up marks if you don't use it. You need to use it. Okay, you need to use it as much as you can. Yeah, we've got an aspect of depression. And this is what I mean. Like, we haven't even read it, and we should kind of have an idea of what's going to come forward, right? So, not having that which having makes them sure, in love, out of her favor when I am in love. The her that he's referring to here is Rosaline. Okay. Alas, that love so gentle in his view should but so tyrannous and rough in proof. If I had this extract, I would obviously make a little note about these characters' use of iambic pentameter. We see Benvolio's control. Sad about his unrequited love for Rosaline. He is, exactly. He's got inner conflict, sadness about Rosaline. Romeo speaks this classic section here, doesn't he? Alas, that love whose view is muffled still should without eye see pathways to his well. Where shall we dine? Oh me, what fray was here? Yet tell me not, for I've heard it all before. The fray he's talking about is obviously the fight in the streets. Malika, yeah, Rosaline doesn't love him back, portraying his unrequited love, emphasizes inner conflict and depression. That's fantastic. That's really good. This contrasts his views on Rosaline later as he describes her as the East and Juliet's son. Really good. Very, very good ideas. Then we get these use of kind of almost oxymoronic language, brawling love, loving hate, anything of nothing. First create heavy lightness, serious vanity, misshapen chaos of well-seeming forms. This is, of course, reflects Romeo's confusion and conflict. So we've got a lot to write about here, don't we? What do I do if I don't understand the extract? Look at the focus of the question and write about what you know for that focus. Feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, still waking sleep, that is not what it is. So again, we see these examples. Now, you've only got, like, as I said, 4 or 5 minutes to get ready and planned. No, because I rather weep, good at heart, what at thy good heart's oppression. So Benvolio is trying to kind of, I guess, soothe Romeo's conflict. Katie, how much time would I suggest prioritizing planning? 5 minutes, 5 to 10, not more than 10. You only need to understand 20% of the extract. You will never use more. That's a really good piece of advice, Swiss Rex. I completely agree. You don't have to talk about every line, right? You just use as much as you can. This is a stark contrast to the expectations of men. Yeah, absolutely. This kind of Romeo's emotive language subverts Elizabethan expectations. Megan, yep, I would say that's a good plan there. 5-minute plan, 2-minute check, right for the rest. Iambic pentameter, that is, we're talking here about the kind of rhythm of the lines. Why, such as love's transgression, grief of mine, my own heavy lies, my griefs of mine own lie heavy in my breast, which thou wilt propagate to have it pressed with more of thine. This love that thou hast shown doth add more grief of too much of mine own. So again, we're seeing these examples of Romeo's conflict. He talks about grief, which is obviously a feeling after death. Could we talk again about that example of foreshadowing? I'm talking about Benvolio's control of the situation. Love is a smoke raised with the fume of sighs, being purged, a fire sparkling in lover's eyes. Being vexed, a sea nourished with lover's tears. What is else a madness most discreet, a choking gall, and a preserving sweet? Okay, so we see, I guess, the kind of conflict and suffering, right? Chandler, how do you know? It's because you revised these sections, right? You revised these sections. So I have a lot of ideas. I need to look at the question again and just double check. Starting with this moment of the play, explore how Shakespeare presents conflict. Okay? Shakespeare presents conflict. So here's my plan, right? I've always planned like this, right? Firstly, conflict in love can lead to pain and suffering. Okay, and for that, I will use that extract there, Act 1, Scene 1. What else can we say about conflict in the play? Yeah, Lixify, that's what I'm doing right now. Remember, guys, obviously, I am slightly ahead in the stream, okay, than where you are. It's not that I'm ignoring your questions, it's just that I'm about 15 seconds ahead. Okay, so just be patient. Honor conflict between Juliet and her father. Good. So we could say conflict also exists within families. And we could use that quote there, disobedient wretch, baggage. And you could talk about the conflict between man and fate. Yeah, absolutely. Conflict between fate and free will. And that would be a nice way to kind of tie up, I guess, two things. Firstly, that line, I am fortune's fall. And then also, thus, with a kiss, I die. Conflict is a result of trying to protect things that are important to characters. Absolutely, that's great. Alex, where do you do the plan on the question paper? Please do it on the question paper. Do it on the paper that they give you. You could talk about the conflict within masculinity. I guess we could, if we wanted to just focus on Romeo for this question, then we could talk about the way that there is a masculine conflict. Absolutely. Do you have to write about every aspect of conflict? No, you won't be able to. So for this question, what I would do for my opening is I would say something like, through the depiction of conflict, Shakespeare attempts to highlight the suffering that occurs in love, as well as through family, and ultimately through fate. Okay, so that would be my opening line. No, Lixify, it's on the paper that you write your answer on, because that's the bit that gets scanned in and sent to the exam board. Conflict ultimately results in tragedy. and through the relationship characters have with those that they love. Hello, Ariane, welcome. Benvolio could come up as a question. Okay. In negative consequences. Responding to societal concerns about, I guess, things like, should you cross out your plan after you used it? Leave it there. Leave it there, Imogen. Absolutely. Can you teach how to embed quote? I always struggle. I can show you how. This would be an introduction, yes. Chandler, this would be. So through the depiction of conflict, Shakespeare attempts to highlight the suffering that occurs in love, as well as through family and ultimately through fate. Because we just planned, didn't we, 3 ideas there relating to conflict. Do we not need to write as a vehicle statement? So something like in the play Rominger uses the theme of conflict. Yeah, that's what I mean about through the depiction of conflict. This is just our opening thesis statement. Conflict ultimately results in tragedy, and through the relationship characters have with those they love, conflict appears to result in negative consequences. Responding to societal concerns about the role of maybe religion or maybe fate. Shakespeare uses conflict as a vehicle to warn society about the dangers of violence. Okay? Carty, Act 3, Scene 1. Now, you may have your own thesis statements. Okay? The key thing that I want to get in there were those 3 things that I mentioned. Yes, Chloe, this is an introduction. 1, Shakespeare's intention, and also a little bit about what we're going to write about. Is it true that if you mention the word society, interest, intro, you're at a 7 already? No. How long does a thesis statement need to be? About this long. How many quotes do you say per paragraph is best for grade 9? 4 to 5, up to 10. Ashwin, this suggests that. Responding to societal concerns about the role of fate, Shakespeare uses conflict as a vehicle to warn society about the dangers of violence. Okay, let's try another question, shall we, and see if this becomes a little bit clearer. Starting with this moment of the play, explore how Shakespeare presents love. Okay, love. So, we are in Act 1, Scene 5. Can you do the thesis statement to thesis signposting your ideas instead of that? You can do that. Megan, it won't make a difference if they're just one word off. How do you write an introduction? Well, you include the 3 things that I've just mentioned. Your ideas. 2. Okay, the context. And 3, Shakespeare's message. This is not a pre-recording, YFRR. Can you give some transitional words to use instead of this or something like that? As well as this, alternatively. So this is, if I profane my unworthiest hand, this holy shrine, this the fine, gentle fine is this, my lips to brushing pilgrims ready stand. Now, again, you should know this extract, okay? And that's the thing, they're always going to give you an extract that you know, right? They're going to give you something that you can respond to, right? So here, I would obviously pick this line now. You can tell me which lines you think you would pick out of this and which one, you know, if you were presented with this. Good probing, you do wrong your hand too much. Have saints not lips, holy palmers too. Tender kiss. Lots of religious imagery. Okay, because what are we saying about love? Well, that love is a powerful, transcendental force. Okay. Oliver, I've never marked for education, no. It's not Cole Palmer, it's Holy Palmer. We know from this section that, of course, they are speaking How do I get a grade 9? You write a great essay. They're speaking, obviously, in couplets with each other. So you tell me, what other parts of the play would you write about in terms of love? Sorry, so many questions coming in, it's hard to keep up. Other than hegemonic masculinity and the feud between the families, what are the difficulties faced by Romeo? Could you talk about his inner conflict? Yes. You could talk about, his struggle with his own families. You around Islam, do you have to write an intro? I would definitely write um an introduction, yes. So this is essentially the moment of the play where Romeo and Juliet fall in love. Okay? But you need to ask ourselves, what are the consequences of this? What are the consequences of them falling in love? And what is Shakespeare saying? What is Shakespeare's message? Because yes, we've got the balcony scene we can talk about. We can talk about their marriage. Deny thy father, refuse thy name. Isn't this a sonnet in which both participate to symbolize their relationship and closeness? Absolutely. But what we need is like a direction for our essay. So if the question's on love, firstly, this would be my first idea. Love is a powerful force. And I would talk about the use of the sonnet, the religious imagery. I would also maybe talk about here, because you compare it to Rosalind's love, so before he shuts himself out and doesn't let light in. Yeah, you could say how love used to be kind of childishness. Their attempt to assert individuality ultimately culminates in tragedy. Love is often exploited for societal gain. So, for example, here you could talk about Friar Lawrence and, I guess to an extent, the nurse using Romeo and Juliet to try to bring peace to Verona. Definitely Shakespeare is criticizing young love. And then I would say that towards the end, even in moments of violence, love will succeed, right? So even in the moment where they die, love will succeed. Tia, there are 3 practice questions in this section here. So you can use any of these 3 to practice this evening. So again, if I come to my thesis statement, what am I going to say? I need 3 things in there: my ideas, Shakespeare's intention, and a little link to context. What does the friar get out of it? Well, he thinks that he's going to bring, this violence to an end. Guys, I am burnt out. What do I do? Step outside, take a deep breath, make yourself a tea. Maybe not a tea, maybe a green tea. And take it easy. It's going to be okay. You guys, everything that I've seen in this chat today, we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. It may not seem like it, but we have some exceptional ideas. Okay, some exceptional ideas. So I just need to show my examiner I've understood the question. Okay, so in Romeo, I'll show you a slightly different version, right? In Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare uses love as a vehicle to send society a warning about the dangers of young love, whilst also highlighting the power that love can have for the individual. Okay? Thank you, Bilal. We're going to take a break in 15 minutes. Could you say that Tybalt's hamartia is his desire to seek revenge? Well, Tybalt is not the tragic hero. Okay, and he's not. He is the antagonist, if anything. He's definitely not the protagonist. Can you go over a thesis statement for fate? Could you write? Can only do what I have. Okay, I wasn't able to plan for every single possible theme. We're not going to go through themes. We've covered plenty of themes today: fate, free will, violence. We're on love right now. So in Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare uses love as a vehicle to send society a warning about the dangers of young love, whilst also highlighting the power that love can have for the individual. Okay. By channeling societal interest in the Petrarchan lover, Shakespeare uses Romeo and Juliet to suggest that love is often reckless and dangerous. Okay? Shakespeare may be commenting on the way in which individuals who get carried away will suffer the consequences. Right? Could violent delights have violent ends? Yes, absolutely. That's a great quote. Petrarchan lovers, so that's like the kind of model for Romeo, I guess, these kind of passionate, intense, loving individuals. Yep, Kazaria, I went through earlier my structure. It's very straightforward. It's an introduction, 3 key paragraphs, drop the extract in where necessary. Okay, let's move into the last question. As I said, I want to cover a variety of themes, a variety of questions. These are just 3 that I came up with. The thematic focus here is violence. Let's spend a little bit longer just going through this extract because it's not one that I've seen come up that regularly. You can let me know once I've read what part of the play that you think this is. So Nurse says, "Let me come in, and you shall know my errand. I came from Lady Julia. Welcome then. Oh, holy friar, oh, tell me, holy friar, where is my lady's lord? Where's Romeo? There on the ground, with his own tears made drunk. Oh, he is even in my mistress's case, just in her case. Oh, woeful sympathy, piteous predicament. The focus here is on violence. Even so she lies, blubbering and weeping, weeping and blubbering. Stand up, stand, and you be a man. For Juliet's sake, for her sake, rise and stand. Why should you fall so deep? And oh." Do let me know as I'm reading here what is happening in this section. Nurse, nurse, ah, sir. Well, death's the end of all. Speakest thou of Juliet? How is it with her? Does she not think me an old murderer, now that I have stained the childhood of our joy with blood removed but from her own? Sped up worlds. Should I wake up early to revise and be prepared, or do I wake up later so I'm not sleepy? Make sure you get 8 hours of sleep tonight, guys. It's my definite advice. Nat, just after he killed Tybalt, well done. Where is she and how doth she and what says my concealed lady to our cancelled love? Notice how those 2 words sound very similar, concealed and cancelled. Oh, she says nothing, sir, but weeps and weeps. And now falls on her bed and then starts up and Tybalt calls and then on Romeo cries and then down falls again. As if that name shot from the deadly level of a gun did murder her. As that name's cursed hands murdered her kinsman. Oh, tell me, friar, tell me. In what vile part of this anatomy does my name lodge? Very similar questions to what he was asking previously, and what Juliet was asking about what is in a name. Romeo's crying, not because he's been banished, but because Juliet is upset. He draws his short sword to chop off the part of his body that his name exists in. And then Friar Lawrence says, "Hold thy desperate hand, art thou a man? Thy form cries out that thou art, thy tears are womanish." Highlights the idea of fate being predetermined, absolutely. Thy wild acts denote the unreasonable fury of a beast, unseemly woman in an unseemly man, or ill-seeming beast in seeming both. Thou have amazed me by my holy order. I thought thy disposition better tempered. Hast thou slain Tybalt, or hast thou slay thyself? So loads of really interesting things here. Now, how does it all relate to violence? Chill guy. In 10 minutes, we'll be finishing and moving on to Jekyll and Hyde. So there's a couple of things here. Firstly, this is just after he's killed Tybalt. He's been banished. He's very upset, mostly because he's concerned that Juliet is, what's the word? Hating him, okay? But a few things come up here. Firstly, in this section, there are key concepts of masculinity, okay? Namely that men should be violent, okay? And men that show emotion are not men, right? Be a man. Art thou a man? Thy form cries out that thou art, but thy tears are womanish. Okay, so this is obviously playing into Elizabethan concepts around masculinity, right? Now, the question says, how does Shakespeare present the impact of violence? How does Shakespeare present the impact of violence? We're in Act 3, Scene 5. Well, this is one of the consequences of violence. Violence will, I guess in some ways, shatter your world, right? Romeo's just gone from being married, and enjoying this world to suddenly being banished. Okay, violence will shatter everything. Okay, there are no positive consequences to this kind of violence. Lexi, would you say the friar is trying to protect Romeo or insulting him? He's insulting him. He's kind of goading Romeo to repress his emotions, right? Could you link it to thy beauty hath made me effeminate? Yes, absolutely, Manisha, that'd be a great place. So what does this particular extract teach us about violence? Well, firstly, violence will shatter your world, okay? Secondly, violence and masculinity are inherently linked. Now, what other parts of the play should we go to look at violence? Where else should we go? Where else should we go? I can think of one really important place to go just off the top of my head, but I'm interested to see where else people think. The fight scene, yeah. So Act 1, Scene 1, Samson, Gregory, bite your thumb, for sure. We could talk about Act 3, Scene 1, Mercutio's death, and that would nicely link to this bit. And then lastly, Act 5, in totality, and the death of Romeo and Juliet, right? Jess, I do not bite my thumb at you. Whale, you've just asked about context. This is context here, playing into Elizabethan contexts around masculinity. So, to finish, how do I bring this all into a thesis statement? Well, I just need to show my examiner again I've understood the question. What is the impact of violence? In Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare shows that violence will always lead to negative consequences. Okay, that's your kind of opening section on violence, isn't it? Reflecting the violent period in which he was writing, Shakespeare uses the characters of the play to send a warning to society about the dangers of propagating and continuing violent acts. Okay? By exploring the impact of perceptions around masculinity, Shakespeare is able to show that violence will always worlds of the individuals involved, right? You could say the perpetuating cycle of violence. That would be fantastic, Malila. Absolutely. Can you link violence and conflict? Definitely. Toby, we're breaking in about 3 minutes' time. Are your models just one of 3 paragraphs of a potential answer? Each of the models I've done here have just been the introductions. If you want to see what I would do next, it's very simple, okay? I would firstly write about the opening. From the opening moment of the play, Shakespeare creates a world of violence in the streets of Verona, okay? That would be my opening. Through the characters of Samson and Gregory, lowly Capulet servants, he creates the sense amongst the audience that violence is a regular and common part of daily life for those in the city. Propagating means creating. Right? So then I would continue. Then I'd probably bring a quote in. During the exchange of, "Do you bite your thumb at us, sir?" we see characters antagonizing each other, based largely around an ancient grudge for which we are not told the origins, okay? As an audience, opening with such violence sets the tone of the play, okay? So again, I'm analyzing, I'm bringing in my ideas right here. When I'm saying things like the play, when I'm saying things like characters, that is method, right? That is method too. It's not that every single time I have to find a simile or a metaphor or personification. If I'm talking about those things, I'm talking about method, okay? Right. We are going to wrap it up there. As I said, that was a whistle-stop tour for the 614 of you here. We are going to head now, to if you're staying here for Jekyll and Hyde, that's great. We're going to start in 5 minutes. If you're heading over to Louis now, then thank you so much. Bella, don't we need a point sentence? Yes, but that was my first sentence. Thank you so much. Obviously, guys, remember, The more you friends you bring, the more you earn. Please use our referral codes. They're in the description. And if you enjoyed this lesson, please leave a review on Trustpilot. Shouting me out would be always much appreciated. Thank you so much. And good luck to you all. There were so many great ideas in here. I'm going to eat a munchie. There are so many great ideas in here. You guys will smash it tomorrow. Just remember, answer the question. Thank you so much, Jess. Thanks, Hazza. I'm going to do Jekyll and Hyde. Louis is doing Christmas Carol. So if you're doing Christmas Carol, you need to head over to his stream now. You've got 5 minutes. I'm going to eat these munchies. And we're going to start in 4 minutes' time. Mind Destroyer GB, welcome. Thank you. Welcome all. Come on in. Hi, everybody. If you're joining me from Louis' stream, we're just having a little snack break. We're going to be doing Jekyll and Hyde in 4 minutes' time. And we're going to eat a couple of cashew nuts. Godiva, in terms of alternative interpretations, on the one hand, we could say this. On the other hand, Sadia, you are shouting out Alex. Yes, please. Always appreciated. We're going to be doing Jekyll and Hyde. Any Werther's Originals fans in the chat here? Anne Marie, there's only Christmas Carol and Jekyll and Hyde. Christmas Carol and Jekyll and Hyde. Rubik's Cube Girl, I got 3 A stars and 8 A's. Thanks, JC. Welcome all, welcome all, welcome all. Gunja, I don't actually recommend you do that. We've got 2 more minutes. And then we're going to get into Jekyll and Hyde. Welcome, Bear does GCSE. I'm just finishing a thing, Werther's Original. I'm going to go use the bathroom and then we're going to begin. Okay, I'll be back in just a second. Okay, here we go. Let's begin. If you're here, it's Jekyll and Hyde time, peeps. The great novel. You know, you're very lucky because you're doing the better book. Yeah, it's a little bit more complex, but it's the better book. So you're very lucky. Okay, cool. Let's just recap plot. As I did in my last stream, if you were here with me before, then you need to know the story. Okay, knowing the story is half of the battle. So that's something to remember. Right. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a what novella? This is the genre. What is the genre? Welcome, Mercy. What is the genre? Well done, Adam. It's Gothic. Very good. Written by Robert Louis Stevenson in 1886, so late Victorian period. Well done to Exu, who read the book yesterday. Explores the duality of who and the conflict between good and evil within the human soul. It explores the duality of... Welcome, Casario. H, we're just going to do a quick recap. Yeah, well done. Of man and the conflict between good and evil within the human soul. The story is mostly narrated by Mr. Utterson, a calm and rational London lawyer who investigates the strange connection between his friend, Dr. Jekyll, and the violent and repulsive Mr. Hyde. Okay. Dr. Jekyll is a respected what? The clue is in the name. Lovely. Great to see people kind of chiming in here. Thank you so much. Is a respected scientist. Known for his charitable work and refined matter. However, he secretly creates a potion drug that allows him to transform into Mr. Hyde, Edward Hyde, a manifestation of his dark desires and impulses. Right, so this transformation enables Jekyll to indulge in sinful and criminal acts without tarnishing his social reputation. It also allows him, I guess, to explore the human condition. Okay, explore the human condition. The novella opens with Mr. Enfield's account of seeing Hyde. What does he do to the young girl? Trample, well done, yep. A young girl in the street. Hyde pays off the family using a check signed by Dr. Jekyll, raising questions about their relationship. As time goes on, Hyde becomes more violent, eventually killing Sir Danvers Carew, a well-respected MP with a heavy cane. Bosh. Well done. Great quotes coming in. Tramples her calmly. Calmly tramples. Good stuff. After the murder, Hyde and Jekyll disappears. So that's disappears. And Jekyll appears to return to his good nature. However, this peace is short-lived. Eventually, Jekyll becomes addicted to the transformation, and Hyde begins to emerge without Jekyll's control. The mystery deepens until Mr. Utterson and Jekyll's servant, Paul, break into the doctor's lab and discover Hyde's body wearing Jekyll's clothes. Bones audibly shattered. That's a great quote there from Oliver Marsh. Zara, could you say he killed Danvers Carew about homosexuality? That's obviously one interesting interpretation. We'll get to those in a moment. Let's just make sure we're all clear on the plot. Letters left behind reveal the truth. Jekyll and Hyde were the same person, and the dual identity had tragic consequences. The novella ends with a chilling message about the dangers of repressing one's darker nature and the fragility of human life. Okay. Werber's Originals. What a special treat. Right. Let's just cover a few things, okay? A few interesting things to to talk about with the story. Okay. So one is the genre. Okay. This is a Gothic novella. Okay. The Gothic deals with the uncanny. So things basically that are strange or odd. The Gothic genre, I guess, also reflected scientific anxieties. And the best way to see this novel, I think, is that Stevenson is basically saying to people, we got to slow down because we don't know what this science stuff is capable of. Okay? We don't know the consequences of messing with this stuff. Gothic novellas were also, I guess, interested in kind of religious influence. And you get here, don't you, one of the novel's big like themes, science versus religion, right? There's 10 chapters, Aisha. The Gothic also dealing with the supernatural. I mean, the best example of that is the fact that a potion turns Jekyll evil, but also other important things that you can write about in terms of the supernatural is the setting. You know, this is a novel that's full of pathetic fallacy. You know, the fog coming in, this idea of things being concealed and hidden. Ivan Locomotive, yes, you will be able to watch this back later, absolutely. And I would say that every single Jekyll and Hyde essay that you write about will probably mention these things. The duality of man, so what is good versus evil. 2, repression in Victorian society. So you will probably know that the Victorians were very much like, people can't behave how they want to. We need to just keep this like vibe and tone of respectability. But just because you tell people not to do something doesn't mean they don't do it. They just do it in secret instead. Science versus religion. And particularly science being influenced by Darwin and the theory of evolution. No problem, Jesse, my pleasure, thank you. And religion being influenced by Nietzsche, and particularly the idea that God is dead. Okay, which was a very controversial statement based out of the nihilist movement. So all of this, I guess, is a little bit of like AO3 based on the back of this. Genre comes under AO1, AO2. Nietzsche was Senor B as well, stuff on Freud, which I'm not going to cover, but yeah, absolutely. Nietzsche was a German philosopher who basically, I mean, I could do a 2-3 hour stream on Nietzsche. So just to give you like a very simple explanation, he was a philosopher who saw that the progression of science, so all of the scientific things that were going on in the 19th century, they were all answering the questions that religion had originally provided the answers for. So at the end of all of this, he said, well, basically, if science has answered all these questions, what do we need religion for? Okay, and that's where he came up with all of this stuff. Now, what I think Stevenson does quite cleverly, and you will know this about Stevenson was raised as a Calvinist, okay, which is a kind of Protestant Christianity. So, but he also went to university in Edinburgh, which is a very, what's the word, like radical scientific place. And if you note that towards the end of the novel, when Lanyon describes seeing the transformation, the person that he screams out for is God, right? Is God. Because what Nietzsche missed was that religion is actually very important in providing people with purpose and hope. Okay? So that's just something that's kind of interesting. And my point is that every single Jekyll and Hyde essay that you write is probably you're going to talk about these things, right? Someone's just asked me, what is repression? It's when you push things down. Okay, I mean, we all practice repression on a daily basis because if we all showed our true selves 100% of the time, nothing would get done. Right? Nothing would get done. So, particularly 7+, talking about genre, talking about the Gothic, Ludu Chowdhury, I've just done a summary of the novel. You're welcome, R. So repression could liken to reputation, absolutely. Okay, let's go through some key quotes. These are the 10 key quotes that I think you need to know. I'm sure that you already know them already because they are classics. And we'll just make a few notes together about what these are. So, in chapter 1, the man trampled calmly over the child's body and left her screaming on the ground. Okay, so a few things I just want to bring out from this. Trampled calmly. I would say that this reflects both Jekyll and Hyde. Okay, the trampling is Hyde. The calmness is Jekyll. Just a word quickly then on Hyde's name. Hyde is a homophone for the word hide, meaning to conceal, but a hide is also the skin of an animal to show his kind of animalistic nature. Okay? Oxymoron, id versus super ego. Yes, there's lots of that. As I said, someone already kind of stated it in the chat, but I'm not going to be able to cover like everything in an hour and a half. Okay, today's just about, let's just have a final rundown of some important stuff and let's see what we can use in our exams tomorrow. Okay. Always when children come up in literature, they're often representations, they're symbolic of innocence. Can they ask a question about how setting creates a disturbing atmosphere? Yashita, they did one year do a question on setting. So yeah, absolutely. How would I put the Hyde thing into my writing? Whenever you write about Hyde for the first time, bring it in. Leal, whoop whoop. So really, this shows just how brutal Hyde is, isn't it, really? I like this verb, screaming, to shows the violence, of the act. Right, next quote. If he shall be Mr. Hyde, I shall be Mr. Seek. Everyone knows this classic quote, right? It's kind of silly, actually, isn't it? Rapid shorts you can listen or you can take notes. Obviously, we have the contrast between Hyde and Seek. It's definitely, it's a pun because it references the children's game. Mohsin, I'm not going back, my friend. You can rewind. Obviously, this is YouTube, so please feel free to use YouTube. It's a children's game, but this is a corruption of the child's act. We're not talking about hide and seek, right? And yeah, obviously seek meaning discovery, hide meaning concealment. But we're not talking about something that, the stakes aren't as low as a game. These are high stakes. This is life or death stuff. Um, yeah, Toby, absolutely. Referring to a childish game takes an immature viewpoint when this leads to multiple violent acts. Absolutely. I guess it also, like, I don't know if you've covered this in your schools, but Utterson, um, as a narrator, but also as the kind of person investigating, he's kind of bad. It's kind of like um, poorly done. Okay, he doesn't take things as seriously as he should. He's not serious about the magnitude of what's happening. He's a hypocrite, Zara. Absolutely, I completely agree. Bushra, you're asking about fatal flaws. That's really to do with tragedies. Jekyll and Hyde is not a tragedy. Right, chapter 3. The moment I choose I can be rid of Hyde, I give you my hand upon that. Okay, two things. Firstly, this is an ironic statement. It also shows, I guess, the power of evil. And when he says, I give you my hand, what he's talking about is honor, right? But the honor is betrayed. He can't. He sounds like an addict, leading to his downfall. Hyde gets the better of him. Absolutely. Kaz, you're completely correct. Victorian arrogance. Look, it's hard for us to imagine because we live in 2025. Okay, but the scientific progress in the Victorian period was insane. It was incredible. We started the century in horses and carts. By the end of the century, you've got light bulbs, telephones. You've got big ships doing voyages across the sea. You've got proper weaponry. You've got an insane level of scientific progress. I think some people are losing their focus a little bit, so I'm very happy to time some people out so we can focus on this incredible novel. So yeah, they had an incredible amount of arrogance. People really felt like they could do anything. And air pollution, senor. Yeah, not yet, but definitely coming. Okay, the next quote is a classic. With ape-like fury, he was trampling his victim underfoot and hailing down a storm of blows. You will probably know that this is obviously a semantic field of violence. You also have this simile, ape-like, to reflect. Yes, Lara Abdullah. You're saying Alex. I'm saying hello, Lara. Ape-like, obviously reflecting the animalistic nature of Hyde. Semantic field is a group of words linked by common ideas. Is it a booklet in the exam or online pieces of paper that are in the booklet? Megan, it's lined pieces of paper in the booklet. He's pure evil. He's been locked up and repressed for too long. He's like a caged animal. Absolutely. Yes. Georgie, you could talk about zoomorphic language too. Hyde is devolved. Yeah, the devolution. So this is obviously a great quote. Link to Darwin's Origins of Species. Great moment to do that if you're writing about this particular quote. Right, number 5. I am done with him. I was thinking of my own character, which this hateful, business has rather exposed. Right, so this is obviously Jekyll. I'm quite done with him. Again, another ironic statement. Again, another one where we can talk about this Victorian arrogance. Because it's a popular quote, will examiners mark us down for it? No, never. Never, never, never. Use the classics. They're classics for a reason. You don't go to a concert to see, I don't know, whatever. Um, Sabrina Carpenter and she doesn't play espresso or something, right? The classics are a classic for a reason. Use them. Use them to your advantages. Aliza, you don't need niche quotes, really. If you want to use niche quotes, excuse me, if you want to use niche quotes, use them from the extract. Yeah? Use the classics to your advantage, right? Use them. Do you recommend starting with your worst text? I just recommend answering chronologically. Begin with Shakespeare and then go to 19th century. Here is obviously about a link to Victorian reputation. So the Victorians were very much like people had to like behave in public. This led to what I spoke about earlier, these ideas of repression. Again, these are just the quotes that we'd use around the extract. Spot the taste. Why do you think some Gothic stories show women as trapped as powerless at first? I guess it's to make them kind of characters of sympathy, trying to build sympathy within the audience. What's the context of the last quote? Victorian reputation. So, the Victorians had a reputation to uphold, and, Jekyll is concerned about his character. I recommend up to 10 minutes of planning. Right, he had his death warrant written legibly upon his face. The rosy man had grown pale. His flesh had fallen away. You tell me, what section are we talking about here while I just highlight the key? I mean, this is obviously that classic Gothic body horror. Okay. And this is probably a great quote if you want to talk about the, a kind of audience reader visceral reaction. Good. We're talking here about Lanyon. Good. See, and this is what I mean, people. Well done. You know your stuff. You know more than you think you do. Obviously, there's a kind of foreshadowing here. Primitive duality, absolutely, Zep. Impression of deformity. We know, the kind of deformed nature of Hyde. Absolutely. Shows the physical effect Hyde has upon people. His evil is contagious almost. Very good. Okay, cool. Flesh is religious imagery. Why? Alex, what do I do if I don't know quotes for certain characters and the question is about them? Just reference. Use references. If you can't think of a quote, use a reference. Rapid Shorts. I'm not sure what Lombroso's theory is, but let me know. JC, I do not do predictions. We're just covering everything we can, so whatever comes up tomorrow, we're ready. Now, as I said, oh God, I screamed, and oh God again, and there before my eyes stood Henry Jekyll. Now, if we're thinking science versus religion, religion as a source of comfort and safety, right? Is he lying and manipulating his friend's loyalty, or does he actually think he can control Hyde? Good question. Samgam, what do you think about the homosexuality interpretation? I think it's very, very valid. But I don't think it's specifically about homosexuality. I think homosexuality is just an example of the kind of thing that was repressed in Victorian society. It could just as be about opium usage, which was very popular. It could be about general repression of anti-religious feelings. Um, Ollie Page, will I be okay just focusing on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? It depends on what the question is. Paula, Alex, what is the same? What is the theme appearance versus reality? So appearance means the way that we appear versus what's actually going on. Chelsea, that's a fantastic sentence. Reflects Victorian anxieties about rapid advancements in science. Yeah. So Lanyon finding religion as a source of comfort reflects Victorian, right? Victorian anxieties about the fear of science, or rather scientific progression, right? Elsu, what does the theme science versus religion mean? It just means what it says. Like, how was society dealing with the progress in this world of science when religion had been the dominant kind of force for hundreds of years, thousands of years? Right, then we move to chapter 10. How are we doing for time? Yeah, great. Man is not truly one, but truly two. I mean, this is essentially like the thesis statement of the novella. Okay? Everything is there. When they say truly two, the two is not just good versus evil. Ella, do we have to use such long quotes? No, you can just use a word or two from these. It's also science, religion. It's also public versus private. You have the contrast of obviously one and two. And then I also like the word truly, because firstly, what is truth? You know, what does he mean by truth? Carty duality, Slipknot. Hey, classic. Jekyll says this in his letter. Can we talk about how in 1885 an act was passed against homosexuality? Relate that to the novella which was published a year later? Yes, a boy, you can. But don't spend too long on AO3 context. Okay, last few quotes from... I felt younger, lighter, happier in body. I knew myself at the first breath of this new life to be more wicked. Again, this was the fear. This is a fear. Will science make us, what's the word, like, value immorality? You've got to think that the novel basically poses the question, if we're going to go down the science route, who sets the rules? How does society stay safe? If there's no religion and no heaven and no hell, then what is there? What's going to keep people from just bugging out, killing each other? What's going to stop that? Because if you're not scared of consequences in this life or the next, then why would you not do the bad thing? And I guess what we see with Jekyll is that he feels younger, lighter, and happier. You've got this tricolon here. Younger, lighter, happier. Right? Which shows the sad effects of this, right? Do you think the zoomorphism of Jekyll referring to Hyde as the animal within me licking the chops of memory is a good quote? Yes. I do. Right. Last little quote before we move into some of the kind of planning sections. If we only learn these 10 quotes, can we answer any question? Yes, I would say so. These are the ones I've always taught my students. I bring the life of that unhappy Jekyll to an end. So here we see this like kind of final agency or autonomy of man. Okay? Man taking his life into his own hands. But in some ways, this personal pronoun, I, he's almost kind of committing, he's also like almost like acting like God. So it's kind of an ironic line. If the whole novel is about the dangers of turning towards science, and then Jekyll ends his own life, which typically the decisions about life and death are left to God, then what does this say? What does this tell us? Can we say that the last quote shows the effect of religion had on restricting him to the point where he now has to kill himself? I think it's more than that. I think it's kind of like the only person who can be responsible for this is me, which is kind of like a humanistic value anyway, isn't it? Isabel, should we talk about Jekyll trying to gain sympathy? With the reader, yes. Yeah, absolutely. These are all Jekyll quotes. JST 971, yes, it is younger, lighter, happier, rule of three. Okay, so I kind of went over this briefly with my other students. If you're new to this, to me, so if you were with Louis for the first section, essentially, I'm sure he covered something similar. But in a nutshell, you're picking up marks for three things in English: your ideas, the way that the methods support your ideas, context, and sorry, that should not be there. That's my bad. Because, as you all know, there is no AO4 for this question. So ignore that. That's my only typo so far on the slides. Good for me. Well done. But look, just as a reminder, ideas is worth 12 marks. AO2, 12 marks. Context, 6. Okay. Great question there from Love from Clay. Can the ending be seen as cathartic? Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, the audience, and we are the audience. A reader is the audience. So this is 12 and 12 and 6 for a total of 30. Now, in order to pick up marks in AO1, we need to maintain a critical style and develop an informed personal response. People. You. What do you think? Examiners want to know what you think. So whatever you think about the question, use that as the anchor. There are no hierarchies of ideas here. Okay? It's not like some. Okay, this is not a novel about a marshmallow. Okay, but anything within reason, anything that you can argue sensibly, you will pick up marks for. Zara, cathartic is a feeling, catharsis. It's where we reveal and expound our emotions based on something that we have seen or read or heard. You can feel cathartic listening to music. Right, the next thing to just note on the mark scheme, use textual references, including quotes. That does not say, it does not say only. Alternative interpretations would come under AO1 and AO2. If we get a question on Utterson, what should we write about for chapter 10? Well, you will know, Amy Sims, that Utterson is reading that letter. So what are going to be his responses to that too? AO2, analyze language, form and structure. Just on the subject of this novel, the form, any single time you say these words, you're picking up marks. Narrator, novella, chapter, right? Because it's a novel. Okay, it's a novel. Do we do as the reader this made me feel? Sophia, that sounds great. Absolutely. Context, show understanding of the relationship between text and context, but it's only worth six marks. So it's about 20% of your essay. Okay, the rest should be your ideas and your methods. Right, let's look at a question, shall we? So, Lara, can I rant to you? If it will help get it off your chest, go for it. So, the question here, beginning with this extract, explore how Stevenson presents ideas about duality in The Strange Case of Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So as we read this, let's kind of think, what are we going to pick out, right? I've been wanting to speak to you, Jekyll, began the letter. You know that will of yours? A close observer might have gathered that the topic was distasteful, but the doctor carried it off gaily. My poor Utterson, you are unfortunate in such a client. So already, right, I never saw a man so distressed as you were by my will, unless it were that hide-bound pedant Lanyon, or what he called my scientific heresies. Oh, I know he's a good fellow, you needn't frown, an excellent fellow, and I always mean to see more of him, but a hide-bound pedant for all of that, an ignorant, blatant pedant. I was never disappointed in any man than Lanyon. So, do we get marks for using critics? No. Not really. I mean, if you want to throw something in critical, then go for it. So there's a duality here already emerging, isn't it? There's the truth versus basically lies, right? Thank you, Leia. Ogo, you know I never approved of it, pursued Utterson, ruthlessly disregarding the fresh topic. My will, yes, certainly I know that, said the doctor a trifle sharply. Okay, so we know that he's obviously sort of, what's the word? Equivocating. Good little word from Macbeth. Should we use quotes and topic sentences in thesis statements? How long do we spend on the Jekyll and Shakespeare? I mean, remember, guys, you've got 105 minutes. Okay, so 10 minutes of planning, and then 45 minutes on each question, and then 5 minutes to check. Equivocation is when we don't tell the truth. Well, I tell you so again, continued the lawyer. I've been learning something of young Hyde. The large, handsome face of Dr. Jekyll grew pale to the very lips, and there came a blackness about his eyes. I do not care to hear more. This is a matter I thought we had agreed to drop. Sorry, 105 minutes is an hour and 45 minutes. What I heard was abominable. It can make no change. You do not understand my position, returned the doctor with a certain incoherency of manner. I am painfully situated, Utterson. My position is a very strange one. It is one of those affairs that cannot be mended by talking. Jekyll, said Utterson, you know me. I am a man to be trusted. I make a clean breast of this in confidence, and I make no doubt you can get out of it too. My good Utterson, this is very good of you. This is downright good of you, and I cannot find words to thank you. I believe you fully. I would trust you before any man alive, before myself, if I could make the choice. But indeed, it isn't what you fancy. It is not as bad as that. And just put your good heart at rest, and I will tell you one thing. The moment I choose, I can be rid of Mr. Hyde. I give you my hand upon that, and I thank you again and again. Utterson, I'm sure this is a private matter, and I beg you to let it steep. Utterson reflected a little, looking in the fire. I have no doubt you are perfectly right, he said at last, getting to his feet. Okay? So, there's no iambic pentameter in here. Elsie, what? Well, let's first, before we get into structures, I'll do that on the next slide, guys. Let's just think about the ideas here. Okay, so if the question is, How does Stevenson present ideas about duality? What do we learn about duality in this extract? This is chapter 3. I don't think that you should focus on the friendship. What is Jekyll doing here? So if we think about duality, firstly, like we conceal our true selves to protect our identities. Guys, I'm not unblocking I haven't unblocked anyone. I haven't blocked anyone, really. By saying the moment I choose suggests that JK thinks he has full agency, he assumes his separate entity is not entwined. Absolutely. Jekyll is a fent fiend. I don't think so. They were opium, definitely, not fentanyl. He's hiding his true persona. Okay, so what other parts of the novella would we look at then? If we looked at this bit, what else could we see? Well, for example, I would say definitely we want to look at kind of Hyde's murders to show the true nature of evil. UK, can you link some Macbeth ideas to Jekyll and Hyde? No. The moment I choose, I could be rid of people in the chat. That's quite good. Lana, yes. AO4 for Shakespeare. What other? So we're going to talk about the concealing of the true identities. We're going to talk about Hyde's murders. Yeah, and then Jekyll's confession. And then that quote. What's the quote for that? Thank you, Hannah Flo. Man is not truly one, but truly two. Trampled calmly. So, how do we begin? Well, very, very straightforward. We have to, like, your introductions need to do these things. They need to show your examiner what you're going to talk about. They need to show your examiner you've understood the question. A-boy, would you recommend planning both questions at the beginning? This is a Mr. Everything English thing, isn't it? I saw that TikTok this morning. If it helps you, then do it. If it doesn't help you, then don't do it. Guys, you've got to do whatever you've sat in that, like you will have done mocks all through the year and practice questions. Do them. My teacher said you do not need a thesis. I've just never read a good English essay that that doesn't have one. So I'll show you what I would do for this. I would firstly outline what I understand duality to be. So in the novella Jekyll and Hyde, Stevenson explores the idea that there exists a duality within the human condition that ultimately tends towards either good or evil, right? Through the depiction of duality, Stevenson attempts to warn society, right, about the dangers of science and the impact this may have on the Victorian social construct. Or no, not construct, fabric, right? So what I'm trying to show my examiner, have I understood what is going on in terms of duality? By reflecting Victorian anxieties about scientific progress, Stevenson uses Jekyll and Hyde to highlight the dangers of duality, right? Okay, and then I would move into my three. So if I go back to my plan, my three topic sentences would be, firstly, duality allows us to conceal our true selves from those that we are close to, right? That would be my first paragraph. My second paragraph would be that through duality, we see the true evil that man is capable of. And then lastly, through duality, we see the intense power, right, that scientific progress can have. And that's where I talk about Jekyll, right? Someone just said pretzel on top. Guys, look, I've never ever taught my students like PEE, Peter, Peasel, any of these things, because in my opinion, they're restrictive. They stop students from writing good essays. This is your paragraphs and your entire essay, you just need to make sure that you've done these things. Have you talked about writer's methods? Okay. Have you given your idea? Have you spoken about the suggestions of the language? Have you talked about characters? Have you linked it to themes? Okay. Have you spoken about the author's intention? Zara, these are not complete. I'm just showing you what my first paragraphs in each of what my first sentences in each of my paragraphs would be. Uniquely Muna. What, how, why is better because it doesn't restrict students in the same way. The problem with pretzel is it says that like, well, Pretzel, that's 7 lines. If you write 3 7-line paragraphs, you're not going to pick up the detail. You're not going to pick up the detail that you need to get the very top grades. Well, no, pretzel is not the one, in my opinion. How many quotes each paragraph? At least 3, somewhere between 3 and 6. More when you're writing about the extract. Okay. How do you write an introduction? You can write your introduction in any order, but every single introduction just needs 3 things. The writer's intention behind the theme, so in this case duality, a reference to the story, and a little bit of context. Sejal, we're not doing predictions. I've said it many times. Okay, let's look at a different question then. So this is beginning with the extract, explore how Stevenson presents ideas about good and evil. I mean, if you got this question, it would be a gift, because basically the story behind good and evil is as follows. Everyone is capable of both good and evil. Okay, that's within everything. That's within all of us, good and evil. Even your parents, even your teachers. So what are you munching on? A munchie, actually, funnily enough. Okay, so let's do the same. I'm going to read this through at home with your highlighters. Drop a highlighter in the chat for me to show me you've got a highlighter. Or a pen. Drop a pen emoji. Should we have a quick little we're moving into the last half an hour. James Pemberton, should we refer to characters as a construct? Definitely. Definitely. Where do you write your plan? On the exam booklet. Pen and that. Where is this extract? Should be in your booklet. Good. Good. Nice. Great to see those emojis coming in. AO4, Lana, is just your spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Can you use highlighters on the extract? Yes, Megan, definitely. Do you get marks for your plan? No, but examiners who see plans at the top of that page will, that sets you up well. Can I just say on the subject, I've seen a few questions, so I'll try and answer this like as clearly as I can. You're going to get 2 booklets, right? Like tomorrow. So you're going to get the kind of questions and then the answer booklet. Okay? Everything that you write in here will be seen by an examiner. Everything you write in there. So this is where you do your plan and your essay. This one, it goes in the bin. Okay, no one ever sees that. Right? So everything that you want your examiner to see needs to go in here. Now, the other thing that I will say is that if you ask for extra paper, right, and you shouldn't need extra paper, but anyone who asks for extra paper, it stops your paper being scanned in. Okay, so your paper basically goes to someone in a box and gets marked by one examiner. Okay. If your paper is scanned in because you didn't ask for extra paper, then your 2 questions, Jekyll and Hyde and Shakespeare, will be answered by different people. That's what you want. You want to spread that load around, okay? Right, enough on that. No predictions. So let's look at examples of good and evil in this extract, firstly, to start with. So time ran on, thousands of pounds were offered in reward for the death of Sir Danvers was resented as a public injury. But Mr. Hyde had disappeared out of the ken of the police as though he had never existed. Much of his past life, much of his past was unearthed indeed and also disreputable. Tales came out of the man's cruelty, at once so callous and violent, of his vile life, of his strange associates, of the hatred that seemed to have surrounded his career. But of his present whereabouts, not a whisper. From the time he had left the house in Soho on the morning of the murder, he was simply blotted out, and gradually, as the time grew on, Mr. Utterson began to recover from the hotness of this alarm, and to grow more at quiet with himself. The death of Sir Danvers was, to his way of thinking, more than paid for by the disappearance of Mr. Hyde. Now that the evil influence had been withdrawn, a new life began for Dr. Jekyll. He came out of his seclusion, renewed relations from his friends, became once more their familiar and guest and entertainer, and whilst he had always been known for charities, he was now no less distinguished for religion. He was busy, he was much in the open air, he did good. His face seemed open and bright and as if with an inward consciousness of service. Notice how, like, the description of Jekyll's appearance is positive when linked with good. Okay? Open, brighten. There's this like semantic field of like, I guess, of like positivity, right? Yes, Mohammed Khalid. Welcome. Is it true that 2 examiners mark your paper 1 for each question? Your examiners will be moderated, yes. On the 8th of January, Utterson had dined at the doctor's with a small party. Lanyon had been there, and the face of the host had looked from one to another, as in the old days when the trio were inseparable friends. Lexical field, similar to semantic field, Sarah, group of words. If your paragraphs have differing concentration of assessment objectives, does that harm your argument? No. Remember, for AQA, when you hit a level, you stay in that level. So you only need to hit it once in a big essay to be rewarded up in that band. On the 12th and the 14th, the door was shut against the lawyer. The doctor was confined to the house pool and no one saw. And on the 15th, he tried again and was refused. And having now been used for the last 2 months to see his friend almost daily, he found his return of his solitude to weigh on his spirits. What does this tell you about evil? Our examiners on our side, like they look for every chance to give marks. Jamie, yes, 100%. 100%. They want to reward you. They want you to succeed. They want you to do well. Evil is powerful and alluring. Okay? Look, even Jekyll, someone as distinguished and respectable as Jekyll, cannot resist the allure of Hyde. He gets pulled back in. There, at least he was not denied admittance, but when he came, he was shocked at the change which had taken place in the doctor's appearance. He had his death warrant, that's the quote we looked at, wasn't it? Legibly on his face. The rosy man had grown pale. His flesh had fallen away. He was visibly balder and older, and yet it was not so much these tokens of a swift physical decay that arrested the lawyer's notice as a look in the eye and a quality of manner that seemed to testify to some deep-seated terror. Deep-seated terror. Do you get marks for writing different theories such as Marxism, feminism, and its context? Guys, it's very difficult. I mean, look, if you want to study A level, then yes. Can you use those 10 quotes in your plan? You can, yes, Ishan, for sure. Mohammed, I keep seeing your question. My paragraph is a whole page because I speak about different interpretation about a quote. Should I do this or should I keep my paragraph short? That's fine to have it be a page long. You don't need to write a conclusion. How do I get the most out of AO2? Make sure that you're writing about the language. Yes, he thought, he is a doctor. He must know his own state and that his days are counted and the knowledge is more than he can bear. And yet, when Utterson remarked on his ill looks, it was a great firmness. So another thing that we're seeing, isn't it, that like evil spreads and corrupts the innocent. I've had a shock and I shall never recover. It's a question of leaks. While my life has been pleasant, I liked it. I used to it. And sometimes I think if we all knew, we should be more glad to get away. Jekyll is ill too. Have you seen him? But Lanyon's face changed and he held up a trembling hand. Look at the response here of Lanyon to evil. I wish to hear no more of Dr. Jekyll. I'm quite done with that person, and I beg that you will spare me any allusion to one whom I regard as dead. Tut tut, can't I do anything? We have 3 old friends. Nothing can be done. Ask himself, he will not see me. I'm not surprised by that. And then we see towards the end, I'm just conscious of time here. God's sake. So again, a kind of religious link to show, again, that comfort and safety in religion. Do you get less marks if you don't use big words, but your analysis is deep? No, you get more marks the deeper the analysis is, for sure. Is it okay to write about Freud's theory of mind if it's relevant to the question? Okay, so what can we say then about good and evil? Sadia, where does it come from? It's from your knowledge of the text. Remember, all we're trying to do in our opening here is think about like this. So what can we say about good and evil? What is Stevenson trying to say? Sarah, handwriting was mentioned on the examiner report last year as being particularly poor. So yes, it does matter. Nina, that will go to 1, I would imagine, if it's just on all on that. Explore how Stevenson presents ideas about good and evil. What is the idea? Thank you, firstly, Ali. So we have the corrupting power of evil. Okay. Like, I would also say that he's trying to say goodness is not a given. Bella, he's trying to say that all aspects of human nature are good and evil. You can't separate it. Ultimately, good needs evil to exist. Don't you think that he's drawing a distinction between good and religion and evil and science, possibly as well? So if one of your paragraphs are in the top band, but the other paragraph does that mean you'll stay in the top band and have like 25 marks? Yes. Is moral decay good versus evil? Yes, definitely. You could say that Hyde is controlled by his id. You could. I check. Is this R and J? Some of the questions coming in now, I'm sensing people's brains are going a little bit. So we're going to do this. One more little plan, another little thesis statement, and then we'll be finishing for today. Okay. We've got about 25 minutes left. Well done to those of you who are still locked in. What do you do after 7 p.m.? You go outside, you breathe in that sweet air, and then you have a nice dinner, and then you get a good night's sleep. No staying up too late, okay? You've done some great revision so far. So I need to just show my examiner I've understood the question. I need to show them my understanding of my argument. So through the depiction of good and evil, Stevenson highlights the dangers of scientific progression and the allure, and the safety and comfort that religion can provide. By reflecting Victorian anxieties about science, Stevenson manages to warn readers about the dangers of evil, but ultimately suggests that the capacity for evil exists within us all. Okay? Ultimately, and I've already said ultimately, overall, the suggestion is that goodness is not a given and that it must be fought for. Okay? So what would I then do for my 3 paragraphs? Well, firstly, I'd say evil is seen as a corrupting force throughout Jekyll and Hyde. Okay? That would be my opening. Characters that appear to be good show examples of evil within the novel. Okay? Overall, and then maybe I'd come back to my final little bit. Lastly, we see that ultimately good needs evil in order to exist. Okay? Shows the dangers of explanation. Really good. Nice. Some great ideas coming in here. Revise what you can, but no all-nighters. Ergo displaying the conflicting nature between Jekyll must withstand the subjected. Could you give us a model paragraph? Sure. Okay. Well, let's just focus on something from the extract, shall we? Why don't we look at this idea here of like corrupting. So initially, Jekyll appears able to resist the temptation of evil by controlling Hyde and ultimately putting his experiment to rest. Okay, and then we'd go in the extract. So I'd jump back, I'd have a little look. What's my extract line? We see that the evil influence had been withdrawn and that he was much in the open air. Evil influence had been withdrawn and that he was much in the open air. Okay? The use of the word withdrawn seems to suggest that the evil has disappeared and that Jekyll is able to live open, perhaps reflecting the Victorian ideal of presenting oneself effectively in the world, right? What else? Lots of people asking about Utterson, right? What if Utterson? Well, if Utterson comes up, answer the question on Utterson. If Utterson comes up, it will only be about Utterson as like a kind of observer of the situation or some kind of like moral individual. But what are the things that they could possibly ask you about on Jekyll and Hyde? They can ask you about the characters, Jekyll and Hyde. They can ask you about violence. They can ask you about the supernatural. They could ask you about science. But it's much more likely, and this is why I don't do predictions, that you get in there and you're surprised at how straightforward the question is. Is it likely that the theme of friendship will come up? I don't think so. Eminence 15, like Utterson being a rational and reserved character, absolutely. Or it might be something around character or setting. But if they ask you a question on setting, the main setting that you're going to write about will be in the extract. So it's not like you're going to have to remember quotes. And then you would just explore the way that the characters operate within the setting. Okay. Right, let's look at this final section. So this would be an example of, I guess, a quite complex question. Explore how Stevenson presents ideas about science. Oops, excuse me, wrong way. Hiki, what type of things could we ask about if Jekyll was changing through the play? Well, we can talk about the way that he, firstly, literally changes from Jekyll into Hyde, but also about people's perception of him changing. Right, so what can we see about science here? Now, this is a good part of the novel. Well, again, Paul and Enfield are very minor characters, but they are characters that I guess are affected by Jekyll, aren't they? So I was so far in my reflections when, as I said, a side light began to shine upon the subject from the laboratory table. I began to perceive more deeply than it was ever been stated the trembling immateriality, the mist-like transience of this so-called so-solid body in which we walk attired. So certain agents I have found to have the power to shake and pluck back thy fleshly vestment, even as a wind might toss the curtains of pavilion. For two good reasons, I will not enter deeply into this scientific branch of my confession. Oops, excuse me. What do we think's going on here in this section here? First, because I have been made to learn that the doom and the burden of our life is bound forever on man's shoulders. And when the attempt is made to cast it off, it but returns upon us with more unfamiliar and more awful pressure. Second, because as my narrative will make, alas, too evident, my discoveries were incomplete. Even then, that I not only recognize my natural body from the mere aura, an effulgence of certain of the powers that made up my spirit, but managed to compound a drug by which these powers should be disthroned from their supremacy, and a second form and countenance substituted, nonetheless natural to me because of the expression, and bore the stamps of the lower elements of my soul. What's he saying here about science? What is he saying here about science? I guess has the power to reveal the true darkness of the soul. So that's like a kind of bringing together of science and religion, isn't it? A little bit. Science acts as a fuel for Jekyll's transformation. Mercy, that's brilliant. He is able to transform into Jekyll via science. Good. I hesitated long before I put this theory to the test of practice. I knew well that I risked death, for any drug that so potently controlled and shook the very fortress of identity might, by the least scruple of an overdose, or at least the inopportunity in the moment of exhibition, utterly blot out that immaterial tabernacle which I looked to it to change. Boulder Dash's nonsense or conversation. Can you talk about the pseudoscience of physiognomy and the devaluation of the question is science? Matthew, you definitely can. Georgia, how many paragraphs do you recommend? I recommend an introduction and 3 paragraphs at least. I would say that this section here, you know, the kind of description of scientific procedure is meant to add realism. So we've got these tinctures, the discovery, the immaterial tabernacle, the chemists, a large quantity of particular salt, the last ingredient. I compounded the elements to boil and smoke together. You don't need a conclusion, no. This is what I would be doing in the exam, by the way. I'd be thinking the question, right, ideas about science. I'd come back, I'd just be asking, what is the science in here? What's it saying? Well, science has the power to reveal the dark elements of our soul. We've got some elements of scientific description here to add realism. We've got the effects of science, a grinding in the bones, a deadly nausea, a horror of the spirit. But then we have that reveal. I felt younger, happier in my body. Okay? I knew myself at the first breath of this new life to be more wicked, tenfold more wicked, sold a slave to my original evil. What's he saying here about science? Vecchi, you'd be doing this much faster. Well, I know, you know, when they say about like, firstly, reading the extract, guys, if you get in there tomorrow and you see the first sentence of the extract and you know what it is, feel free just to dive straight in, start making your annotations, coming up with your plan. If you are a bit unsure, then yes, obviously read through. But if you go in and you see it and it's like, you know, the trampled calmly extract and you know it, then just dive in. You know, claw some minutes back, right? Science has a physical effect on the individual. Okay, and it's a very negative one, isn't it? So this is a kind of a negative scientific portrayal. What happens if you have writer's block? Don't worry. Remember, if you write nothing, you'll get 0 out of 30. Now, I don't think anybody in here will be doing that. But if you write even one sentence, you're going to get 1 out of 30 because they'll reward the one sentence that you've written. So just make sure you get down something on the page. Answer both questions. So there was no mirror at that date in my room, at which stands beside me as I write. And then obviously this concludes in I saw for the first time the appearance of Edward Hyde. Now, this comes from the final chapter. This is the final chapter, chapter 10. Okay. What other parts of the novel would we write about if we were going to write about science? So obviously from the extract, we're going to talk about mainly the way that science can create evil. But is there anything else about... Well, why is there always someone who has to take it like way too far? Hugh Buchanan. Apologies for anyone who saw that. Right, so what's the best theme? Lanyon witnessing the transformation. Absolutely. I would talk about Lanyon witnessing the transformation. But what are we going to say about that in terms of what does that show about science? I guess it's about like the effect on the innocent. People will suffer. Talk about the differences between Lanyon and Jekyll. Yep, Toby, that's a great idea. Hello, Jamie, welcome. King Stealthblade, what's the best theme character to rise? That's what we've been doing out here. And then obviously we'd provide as a contrast, the contrast of religion and its power to comfort. So that would namely be, I guess, the oh God. So to conclude, I'm going to write one last little thesis statement here. This would be, I mean, look, it's a bit of a complex question, but it would be a really good way. How are we gonna start this? How does Stevenson present ideas about science? How would we begin that? Sarah, I love that. Religion brings out the good and science brings out the bad. In the novel Jekyll and Hyde, sorry, novella, in the novella, excuse me, Jekyll and Hyde, Stevenson explores the idea that science can act as a detrimental, excuse me, two T's on my act, as a detrimental. If I wanted a 6, would it be okay if I used 2 for 3 votes per paragraph? Yes, Nina, definitely. As a detrimental and corrupting force in society, right? Could you talk about the religion brings out the good and science brings out the bad when talking about good and evil? Yes, you can, Ali. Absolutely. Afia, do you see my messages? I do see that message. So, writing at a time of clear scientific progress, Stevenson manages to channel Victorian anxieties about science, in particular, the way it contrasted to religion. With religious ideals, right? Through the characters of both Jekyll and Hyde, right? Then I'd bring in my thing. Stevenson essentially posits that science is a force for evil and religion is a force for good. Okay. Now, then I need, just to think, if we were going to continue, my free, we could say that it was something feared by the Victorian society at the time. Good. So we might begin by saying, throughout the novel, we see the violent effects of science through the character of who? Which character? Stella, Catholics are a type of Christianity. Stevenson was a Calvinist. Could you talk about rationalism and romanticism, with Jekyll being sort of romantic scientist and Landon being a rational one? Definitely. I like that. But remember, we're talking, yeah, and of course, if we're talking about science, I mean, there's multiple routes, aren't there? Lanyon and Hyde. Good. Of Hyde. Mimi, after you finish, can I take a pict, please? Not quite sure how that would even happen. Well, Senor B, you're right in terms of that kind of evangelicalism. I mean, ultimately, I guess it's reflecting Stevenson's belief that like science probably may not have all of the answers. Um, well, boy, it's not so much that he portrays religion as good. I guess it's just like, what if? Okay, cool. So further down, we see the violence effects of science through the character of Hyde. Stevenson explores the way that science can impact the innocent of society. And then lastly, in contrast, Stevenson explores the power of religion and the way it counters scientific progress. Okay? So that would be like the kind of fabric of my essay. Duality, how could I bring in Lanyon's relationship with Jekyll? Would you need to? Can I just say, like, we've got about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to kind of summarize. A few things here. One, across both Macbeth, Jekyll, Christmas Carol, whatever it is, one, you can't write about everything. Okay, you can't write about everything. So just focus on the question. Lana, yes, Calvinist. Can you say that Stevenson was trying to warn society on the dangers of science? Mackey, definitely. To get a grade 9, Chelsea, will I have to reference other literature texts? No. Focus on the question. You can't write about everything. Okay, 2, remember the 3 things you need to write about. And if you're unsure, write about one of these. The audience, the author, or the text. Okay, those are your 3 most important things. If in doubt, ask yourself, should I write about the audience? Should I write about the author? Should I write about the text? Okay. 3, introduction, and then 3 good paragraphs. In each paragraph, 3 to 4 small quotes, and you'll be good. But remember, the main thing that all examiners just want to see are your ideas. Okay, your ideas. Right, we're going to finish up there. How many paragraphs? 3. Right, thank you so much for today, everybody. You will be great tomorrow. You will be great. Answer the question, and you will be great. Okay, I've seen so many good ideas in here. You've done some good revision. Go out there and enjoy yourselves. Get a good night's sleep. Rest up. You can watch this back in the morning and enjoy. And ultimately, look, people, have fun. Enjoy yourself there. Enjoy the question. Enjoy the extract. If in doubt, just focus on that extract. Focus on the extract. It's there to help you. If you enjoyed it, please do leave a review on Trustpilot. Naming me would be fantastic. Everything is a method. You're going to be great. I believe in you. You're going to be great. Okay? Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fantastic. I hope you have a pleasant evening. Get some rest, get outside, breathe some air. And don't forget, tell your friends across all of our subjects, maths, English, science. We're doing these every night before the exam. Let me know how you get on next week when I see you for Lit Paper 2. Thank you, Nina. Thank you for all of the support. You're going to rock. You're going to rock. You're the best. You're the best. You are very, very clever. You got this. You've got this. You know the quotes. You know the themes. You know the ideas. Come on. Come on. I'm going to eat a munchie just for you guys, okay? Peace. See you later.